generation.
Dates in the Bible don't quite match the marriage certificate. Uh-oh.
And welcome, America, to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Boy, who do we got for guests today? Let's start with Lou Conter. Lou is one of the last two survivors of the attack on the USS Arizona at Pearl Harbor in 1941. He's 99 years old. He's written his life story, so you'll hear a little about the attack, other things that he participated in World War II. A fascinating visit coming up in about 10 minutes. And then later in the show, I'm going to talk to Dr. Joe Price from Brigham Young University. He's heading up an amazing research project concerning the 1918 pandemic, and it involves AI handwriting analysis, plus using death certificates and census records. You got to hear what they're doing and how it applies to the pandemic today. That's coming up later in the show. If you haven't signed up for our weekly Genie newsletter yet, you know it is time. Go to our website, ExtremeGenes.com, or go to our Facebook page and get signed up. You get a blog from me each week, a couple of links to past and present shows, and links to stories you will find fascinating as a genealogist. Right now, let's get fascinated by David Allen Lambert. He is in Boston. He is the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. Hello, David.
Hey, how are you, sir?
I am doing grand. Thank you very much.
I got something to tempt your appetite, though. My first story, which of course you know about because it's on ExtremeGenes.com, is restauranting through history. You know, it's funny. You think about restaurants and how some of them range from really quick serve to something that's, sit down and many courses. Restaurants early on were really focusing on speed eating because they want to get you in and out of there. In fact, one of the things that they tried to do was make the seating more uncomfortable. So you're kind of want to not stick around for so long and you're in and out 8 to 10 minutes, 20 minutes maybe.
Oh, yeah. So and air conditioning, too. You ever go into a restaurant and it's just freezing? That's why. Mm-hmm. This article goes even deeper than that because it talks about the fact that Americans have been known for eating fast going back to the early 19th century. And they share some quotes from foreigners at that time that talked about how fast we eat. So it's a pretty incredible article.
My mother would say, "What are you, a firefighter?" And I would storm off to the other room to watch TV or play video games when I was younger. And I said, maybe that's part of that whole speed-eating gene.
Yep.
If there is one. Well, we talked about Ask Us Anything recently in regard to what will happen to your stuff, your genealogical notes. And a great story, which you'll find on ExtremeGenes.com, is by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Where will your years of genealogy research end up? I'm starting to wonder, did they listen to our show before they wrote this?
Perhaps so.
There you go. In conjunction with having Lou as our guest this week, I thought I'd bring up a story which touched my heart a little bit. As you know, many sailors were never identified from the West Virginia or the Oklahoma and many other places at Pearl. And now in May of this year, a Navy fireman 3rd class Welburn Ashby will be going home to Centertown, Kentucky. He was on the USS West Virginia and had been buried as an unknown until recently. So
from 1941 till today, 80 years later, he's finally going home identified.
That's some serious closure for a family, and there are more and more of them. It's happening all the time with the DNA matches. It's tough to talk about politics and genealogy, but I just want to say that in this case, somebody complaining about Warren G. Harding, who actually was alive when he was president, has just passed. At 115 years old, Iris Westman of North Dakota died, and she had more to say about Harding than she did our previous president, number 45.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, she was asked to compare Harding and Trump, and she went on more about, she said she didn't really know that much about President Trump. She just remembered Warren G. Harding.
Well, after you've lived 115 years, 4 years is kind of a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
So that's great. Well, she's a kid compared to the person in this next story. In fact, he could probably have babysat her because he's 9 years older.
Oh.
Yeah. Fish, remember we thought that we had the last of the people from the 19th century dying? Well, that's not the case, perhaps. Manuel Garcia Hernandez may be the oldest man in the world at 124, born in Mexico, December 24th, 1896, and he has a birth certificate to prove it. This fella was a farmer, lived in the same area near Vera Cruz. The Guinness Book of World Records is checking into it, and it may be the case. So we may have one man, or actually one person, left from the 19th century in the world, and he's 124.
Wow, in Mexico.
In Mexico, yeah.
And he says he misses farming.
He does miss farming, but, David, they always say a secret to long life is hard work. My grandfather used to say, if you rest, you rust. Well, this guy has not rusted. I'd like to know his secret.
Wow.
I always loved our lost and found stories, and a great one came up recently for a person that was going through their home in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and they discovered a 19th century Bible and broken rosary beads in the back corner of a house buried in insulation. And she did some research and wanted to get it back. And I thought to myself, wow, that's a really good story. Then I find out who she gives it back to, Joe Biden's sister. Hey, how lucky is that? I had one family Bible returned a couple of years ago. This person has 2 large family Bibles.
Wow.
Lucky them.
And did you see the size of that Bible that was used during the inauguration? It was massive.
I hope they didn't drop it because it'd break somebody's toe. It was huge. Well, that's all I have for this week from Beantown, but I wanted to extend the wishes that if you're not a member of American Ancestors, after 175 years, we'd love you to be a member. And don't forget, you can save $20 by using the coupon code EXTREME when you go to become a member on AmericanAncestors.org.
All right, David, we'll talk to you at the back end of the show for Ask Us Anything. Boy, we got a lot of great stuff coming up for you today. Later in the show, Dr. Henry Louis Gates is coming back. He's going to be talking about his upcoming edition of Finding Your Roots on PBS. And you will not believe some of the stories he's going to share with us coming up a little bit later on. Plus, we're going to talk to a professor from Brigham Young University about his research project into pandemics involving a lot of family history and AI that reads handwriting. Unbelievable. And coming up next, we'll talk to a man that survived the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, and went on to fight many more battles in that and other wars. We're going to talk to Lou Conter, who's written a new book about his life, 99 years old. He's coming up next in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Whether you're new to family history, a seasoned pro, or you've simply missed the event in years past, now's your chance to connect at Roots Tech Connect, the world's largest family history conference. For the first time ever, this event is 100% virtual and 100% free. That's right, virtual and free. Now you can discover your heritage from wherever you are. Imagine 3 full days of discovery, dozens of classes to choose from, taught by presenters from around the world, all from the comfort of your couch. Oh, and don't forget the exciting celebrations of music, food, dance, and traditions from around the globe. Enjoy inspiring keynote addresses and learn from top-notch speakers, and see yourself in the story of the human family. Discover your story. Discover Roots Tech Connect. Live online February 25th through 27th, 2021. Register for free at rootstech.org. That's Roots Tech Connect, free at rootstech.org.
At Legacy Tree Genealogists, we provide families like yours with the stories of your ancestors, a legacy that will be cherished for generations to come. Legacy Tree Genealogists provides genealogy research for clients worldwide, helping them discover their roots and personal history through records, narratives, and DNA analysis. And when your research requires access to on-site archives in the countries your ancestors lived, Legacy Tree Genealogists has researchers in more than 100 countries around the globe who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Legacy Tree Genealogists is the recommended research firm of genealogy industry leaders worldwide, including MyHeritage, 23andMe, and more. Check out what our clients have to say. Absolutely the best. They communicated through the entire process, and my report arrived on time. The story of my family with supporting documents was very fulfilling. Tom G. Google review. Don't wait any longer. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. Legacy Tree Genealogists. We do the research. You enjoy the discoveries.
Well, genies, what a time we're all going through right now. And with all this time on our hands, you probably agree the best lemonade we can make out of this is to sharpen our genie axes and learn how to extend our family trees, gather more photos and documents, and discover those remarkable family stories our descendants can benefit from for generations. Well, I have more time now, too. And I want to help you learn what you need to know. That's why I've created a new Facebook group, Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. I'm so pleased that so many of you have already signed up and are helping us to create a supportive community of family history researchers. On this page, we can brainstorm and share ideas on how to tear down those brick walls that we all have. So feel free to join us. The Facebook page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Feel at home with others who live in our Genie world and want to make the most of this unique time. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Join us. Well, my next guest on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, is Lou Conter. And Lou was first on the show about 4 or 5 years ago as we talked about his experience as one of the lone surviving crew members of the USS Arizona that was hit by the Japanese at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Lou is now 99 years old, and he's an author. Lou, welcome back to Extreme Genes.
Thank you very much. You know, Scott, 2 years ago in Pearl Harbor, Luann, my daughter and son, talked to me and said, you ought to write a book on your life. And I said, oh, no, I just did my job. I was trained well, and I did my job the best I could. I always believed in doing the best you could at any job you do. So that's what I did. And over the last 2 years, with Mary and Jimmy and Luann, they got it together. I didn't do much but sit here in the chair and wait for them to ask me questions.
Well, you did the hard part, Lou. You actually lived through this. I'm sure the rest is pretty easy after that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not here. I just did my job. Saved the lives the way I had to, you know.
Let's talk about this a little bit for people who aren't familiar with your story. I mean, you pretty much went right from basic training onto the Arizona.
Yeah, I went in the Navy in 1939, San Diego boot camp. And then I was assigned to the USS Arizona, which is anchored in Long Beach at the time. In those days, we had hammocks and sea bags. Went aboard the ship, reported aboard. I went down, he says, there's your hook for your hammock, and there's your locker, and I'll see you on deck in 20 minutes.
That was pretty quick. And then, of course, Roosevelt assigned pretty much all the Navy to go out to Pearl Harbor as the Japanese were beginning their aggressive efforts over there in the Far East, and the rest is pretty much history. Let's talk a little bit about what happened that day, once again, as you recall it.
Well, we went out to Honolulu, Pearl Harbor, April 1st, 1940, for maneuvers. And we got through with the maneuvers, and they said that the fleet was to stay in Pearl Harbor. So we changed to April 1st of 1940. And so we were out there for 18 months before Pearl Harbor hit. So half the fleet was out and half the fleet was in.
Mm-hmm.
So we were out on maneuvers 26th of November. We were supposed to come in on Monday the 8th, and the afternoon after the other half the fleet went out. They ordered us into port on Friday, the 5th. I was in the bridge. I was a quartermaster at that time, and I was quartermaster of the watch. And Captain Van Valkenburg and Admiral Kidd, they didn't like coming into port. Said we should not be coming into port until Monday afternoon. We were not supposed to all be in there together, but we were ordered in by Washington.
When did you know you were being hit by the Japanese?
Going on watch, we had the color guard there of half the band play colors for 8 o'clock, and it was about 5 minutes to 8, and the first planes came across, and we saw the red stars, knew exactly what was going on. Hell, our guns were fired in 30 seconds, and we only lasted 7 or 8 minutes. 8 minutes after 8, we blew up. Took a bomb in starboard side, number 2 turret, went through 5 decks into the lower handling room and blew up 1 million pounds of powder, and that's what caused the big fire and everything.
Wow.
Everything was ablaze from the mainmast forward.
And how did you survive?
Well, it was just one of those things. I was quartermaster of the watch. I was between number 3 turret and foremast, the mainmast. We had a little office in there, and when the bombs hit there, Commander Fuqua came out of the number 4 turret. The bomb hit along there and knocked him out for a few minutes, and he came to and he took charge because we'd blown up, and he knew the admiral and captain were both killed. Everybody was coming out of the bridge towards the quarterdeck and the mainmast were on fire, and they were burning. In those days, they had shorts on, and for sailors. And we got 15, 16 of them laid down on deck. And it was about 30 minutes after the raid started, 40 minutes. We got them into the motor launches alongside the deck and headed for the hospitals, and got them into the hospital. And then we went back and helped take the lines in to fight the fire Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, and then we all crapped out. There was only about 100 of us that got off the ship, and the rest were all killed, 1,177.
Oh.
We had let the ship cool down for 4 or 5 days, then we went back and dove on the ship. We got a few bodies out, and that was all at officers' quarters, but we only did that for about 4 or 5 days. Then Commander Giesman, who was our executive officer, they made him captain right away because we declared martial law immediately. And so he called Pete and I in there. We had a machine gun in the back of a Jeep and put out the order that nobody was to be on the streets after sunset or before sunrise or they get shot. And that law was in effect from December the 7th, 1941 until May of 1945.
Wow.
And it worked like one because everybody knew we meant what we said. If we told them to sit down and shut up, they sat down and shut up.
So tell me about the book, Lou, and what areas of your life it covers, because obviously the Arizona is one big chunk of it.
Arizona, and then I had my orders. B.J. Johnson was in 5th Division Gunner's Mate. He said, Lou, let's go to flight school. We got our orders to go to flight school. And we hit Pensacola the last week in January, and we worked 7 days a week and 7 nights a week, and we got our wings on November the 15th, 1942.
Wow. So did you spend the rest of the war then as a pilot?
Yeah, I was a pilot. I was transferred to San Diego to VP-11, which is Patrol Squadron 11. We had PBY-5s, and they held us there for a month while they painted us black. We were the first Black Cat squadrons. And we took off from San Diego, 19 and a half hours later, landed in Conneaut Bay. 12 of us, and that was our Pacific Black Cat start.
Okay.
We were operating out of Midway there for a month and a half, and they ordered us to Perth, Australia. It took us 6 days to get to Perth.
Australia was really a great base for the Allies at that time, right? And fortunately,
Perth,
because I know the Japanese were planning on invading it at one point, but after Midway, they had to change their plans.
Had to change their plan after Midway, and then we operated out of Perth, the northwestern corner of Australia, going up to Timor and southern Philippines and bringing people out and everything. And the third week in September 43, we'd go out at 5:30 at night, come in at 8:30 in the morning, 13, 14 hours, and do our night bombing runs at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
The 2 Japanese contenders anchored up the coast of New Guinea on the east coast. So we went out of there one night at 5:30 and 5:15. We had 2 1,000-pound bombs, do 500s, and we got up the coast of New Guinea about 7 miles off the coast towards Wewak and took a shell through the waste hatch where we had parachute flares. We carried parachute flares, and we'd drop them every 30 minutes at midnight, 12:30, 1:30, 2:30, keep the Japanese awake so when they fought the ground forces the next day, they'd be tired. That shell went through the waste hatch and exploded one of the parachute flares, and we were 700 feet and 7 miles off the coast. And we had to land immediately in the open sea because we had 2,000-pounders and 2 500s, and we were on fire and got everybody out. And Gordon Kennington, our PPC, said, I want you guys to say your prayers. We're 7 miles offshore. It's going to be dark within a half an hour. I don't think anybody can swim 7 miles with these sharks out there in the water, and so say your prayers. And I said, bullshit. I said, get in a line and hold hands and tread water lightly and save your strength. You're not dead yet. And it was about 40 minutes, and our commanding officer saw us on fire and came back over, and they made a pass over to 50 feet and saw that we didn't have any life jackets or anything on. So they dropped one of their lifeboats to us, and I swam out and got it, got the guys into it. We got into New Guinea at about 2:30 in the morning, hid in the jungles that night. Next day and the next night, we were sitting there, and I said, I hear that's a PT boat out there. They're probably looking for us. So I told the guys to be quiet, stay in the jungle, because you'd be 100 feet in the jungle. The Japanese couldn't find you. You shut up and didn't make any noise or anything, didn't fart or anything else. You just stayed quiet. So we went out, and there was a PT boat there, and we got within 100 feet of them. They had those guns pointed out. I said, turn those guns away. And they said, well, that's Connor, come on aboard. So we went aboard, and I briefed them. They said, you're not going back. I said, we're going to go back and get the other 7 men. Said, you're not going back, so you're staying here. So anyway, briefed the UGT men, and they went in a boat, got the guys by name, got them out of the jungle, got them in the boats, and they were back 45 minutes to the tender at the
wow.
PT boat. And when we got them aboard, they all kissed the deck, and it's the first time they spoke since we got shot down.
Unbelievable.
So,
well, if you want to read more stories about Lou Conter in his own words, the book is The Lou Conter Story. It's available on Amazon and all the usual places. And Lou, congratulations, by the way. I'm hearing that it's like the #1 book in history in the country right now. You're a best-selling author.
oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, gee.
How many pages is your book, Lou?
280, 300.
Well, I'm sure there's some great stories in there.
Nanette did a great job on doing that, and Luann and Jimmy and Mary did a
Wow.
great job on putting that book together. And Warren said, your life before you went in the Navy is worth a book, because, you know, in 21 I was born, and 23 my young sister was born. We were on our way to Gallup, New Mexico. My dad was foreman of a road gang out of Thoreau, New Mexico, east of Gallup. We was laid in tents out there in the Navajo Indian Reservation for 2 years before we went back to Denver for my older sister to go to school. And it was quite an experience in those days.
What a life. 99 years old. Well, it's been an honor again to talk to you, Lou, and congratulations. Congrats on the book. And I know I speak for everybody thanking you for all that you did in the war and afterwards to serve your country. And I hope people will buy the book. It's The Lou Conter Story, Conter. Get it at Amazon right now. And hope to talk to you again on your 100th birthday, Lou. It's coming up soon, isn't it?
September. I'll be 100 September 13th.
Unbelievable. Godspeed, sir, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much. And I hope they all read it and all the high school learn survival. My main thing is don't panic if you get into tough situations. Sit down and make a plan.
I love it. Thank you so much. And coming up next, we'll talk to a college professor who's got a project going involving family history, pandemics of the past, and how they affect our current situation. Wait till you hear what he and his team are doing. It's all coming up in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Welcome back. It's Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth. You know, it's not too often that we go through a pandemic, thankfully, but we went through one a century ago, and who knew that there'd be data available there that could help us today? And that data is being mined by the BYU Record Linking Lab, and Dr. Joe Price heads it up. And Dr. Price, welcome to the show. This is a fascinating project you've got going on right now, and you got a lot of kids involved.
Yeah, that's one of the best parts of it.
So fill us in on where you came up with this idea and how it's going so far.
Yeah, sure. So even before the pandemic started, I was working on a project with Martha Bailey and some other people to extract cause of death from death certificates. Cause of death is really helpful for studying a bunch of public health interventions in the past. And then the pandemic hit, and we realized we were in a fantastic place to use that data to understand the 1918 pandemic to maybe draw some lessons for the present.
So you're working with Family Search on this, and Family Search obviously uses a ton of volunteers, and part of the databases available on Family Search are these death certificates. Is this a standard operating procedure to get the cause of death on most death certificates, some of them, or are you actually having to go back and have volunteers get those causes for you?
Well, that's the nice thing about what we're doing is that Family Searches had these death certificates, and when they had volunteers index the death certificate, they got the name and the death date and other genealogical information.
Right.
But they never indexed the cause of death. And so we could have gone back and had humans index those millions of records. Or what we decided to do was use machine learning and try to do it in an automated way. And so we've been able to automatically extract the cause of death from all of those images.
From the handwriting?
That's correct.
Wow, that's a huge win there. Did you have the technology yourself, or did you have to develop it?
Well, the nice thing is the Family History Technology Lab at BYU has been working on handwriting recognition for a long time. And so we were able to use some of the tools they've developed. But there's also tools being developed at Facebook and Adobe and other places to try to do this same task.
I see.
And so we're able to use some of the code that others have created and combine it with stuff we've created to try to automate this task.
How many death certificates have you included in the project so far?
So we had done a whole bunch of years in Ohio, and then we reached out to Family Search and were able to get the death certificate images for another 11 states. And so we focused on all of the death certificates for 1918. So even though we were looking for people who died of influenza and pneumonia, we ended up getting everyone. And so I think we've processed a few million records, but the process now is in a good position to maybe do all of the death certificates. And so that's going to be tens of millions of people. And then our hope is this might encourage archives to make their images of their historic death certificates publicly available, and we could use the same process on all of those records too.
I see. So will these causes of death then be included in the index version of the death certificates with Family Search then moving forward? Are you kind of giving it back?
Oh, yeah. Whenever we do a project with Family Search, we're always giving back. So we have another project where we're auto-indexing things from census records, fields that weren't indexed before. And so in that case, we're always giving the data back to Family Search so it can become part of the discovery experience for people doing family history.
Wow. So you're talking about 1918, yet the pandemic lasted all the way to 1920. Am I correct to assume you're going to move that forward to cover that 3-year span, or is there a cutoff?
No, it'll move out. And we also want to look at influenza rates prior to that, so you can get an idea of what the typical pattern looked like. But for most of our projects, we've been focusing on that fall of 1918, because that's when a lot of the public health interventions were put in place. And so we're using those public health interventions, which you can read about in newspapers, to see if they worked, and use it to estimate what's the impact of those interventions on death rates during the pandemic.
So what have you learned? What's it told you?
So there's only one project that we've looked at, but we think it's an important one. We focused on Ohio and Massachusetts, and we looked at every city that had at least 25,000 people. And we culled through the newspapers and tried to figure out what they did. And we found 4 cities that basically did nothing. They just decided to ignore the pandemic and not close anything. And we found that the death rate in those 4 cities was about twice as high as otherwise similar cities that did do something. That's like a lesson we can draw from the past.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And what did you learn about the people and how the bug itself transmitted itself?
Yeah, we're starting to do some of that by looking at death rates within families. So we have this feeling that if we see someone die of the flu within a family, within a household, that it's likely the other people were also exposed.
Right.
And that might allow us to look at the within family variation in the susceptibility. I'm also working with Jonas Helgertz to look at whether exposure to the flu early on in the pandemic provided some protection later on. The pandemic hit in multiple waves, and so some cities got hit early, and so we can go and see if somehow that early exposure maybe had some protective effect later on.
And so what are the similarities you're seeing with the current pandemic to that so far? Have you picked up on any?
I don't know. I think the biggest contribution we're going to make is to make this data available for other people to use. We have specific research questions. But one of the neat things about the 1918 pandemic is we can look at long-run effects. And so it might point to things we might want to be careful about, 10 years down the road after this pandemic is done.
Sure. There really are questions, aren't there? I mean, when you consider, okay, not everybody's going to get a shot. So this bug is still going to exist out there, but how much is it going to spread among those who have been immunized? And then at what point does it just become part of the normal medical concerns we all have? I mean, they can't be measuring cases and deaths and all this information we see every day forevermore, any more than we really do that with typical influenza, right?
That's right. And I mean, my daughter had a really neat insight. I was like, COVID-19 doesn't seem to be killing teenagers. And she said, yeah, but we don't know if it affects us until 40 years from now. So I think she had the kind of foresight to say, like, okay, we know it's not killing teenagers, but we don't know what the long-run consequences are of getting COVID. And so we can go back and look at the 1918 pandemic and say, like, hey, these are people that didn't die, but they had family members that died, so they were probably exposed. Did it affect their lifespan? Did it affect other aspects of their long-run health? Right, yeah.
Have you seen any hint of the answer to that question yet?
No, I mean, to do that, this is where the family history part comes in, is then you have to link the death records to the census records.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And so we're actually linking these 1918 deaths back to the 1910 census and then forward to the 1920 census so we can get an idea of who they were living with when they died. So we can kind of think about who was likely in their household that got exposed. And then we can follow those people forward in time to their death records. So we could say something about what are the longer-run consequences of exposure, even when you don't die directly from the pandemic.
Sure. So are you able to actually follow like a curve of, the growth of the disease through time using the death records?
Yeah, I mean, the neat thing about our data is this is the first time ever that we've had daily death counts. And it's also the first time that we have it for smaller cities. So the U.S. government would aggregate death certificate data, so you could actually look at, monthly rates for all states, and then you could look at monthly rates for some of the bigger cities, but you could never look at the smaller cities, and you could never do it at the daily level. And so in our papers, we can actually show you exactly what these profiles looked like during the height of the pandemic.
So you can actually watch this. That had to be absolutely amazing when that data started rolling in for you to see that curve.
Oh, it was amazing. Yeah, Carver Coleman is a BYU student that's been doing amazing work on this. He's been creating the graphs showing the profile of the death rates of flu and pneumonia during the 1918 pandemic for specific cities. Mm-hmm. And it's really insightful because you can see the cities that implement interventions often do it because the death rates are starting to go up. And then you can see them implement their interventions and see what happens as a result.
So you're able to create a timeline then around their interventions at that point. So you could say, all right, here's the curve, and you can see that. And the monthly thing wouldn't reveal that nearly as easily, would it?
No, and it might even give you the wrong impression, because imagine the intervention happens in the middle of the month. It might actually look like the cities that gave the interventions actually had higher death rates because they're actually reacting to the death rates rather than causing the death rates. And so the daily data is just a really rich way to look at the evolution of the disease within a particular town.
Well, he's Dr. Joe Price. He's at BYU. And Dr. Price, thanks so much for talking about this with us. And it's an amazing project. And we look forward to seeing some of the conclusions you get from it and how it applies to what we're going through right now.
Yeah, thanks.
And coming up next, Dr. Henry Louis Gates talks about his upcoming episode of Finding Your Roots on PBS in 3 minutes.
At Legacy Tree Genealogists, we provide families like yours with the stories of your ancestors, a legacy that will be cherished for generations to come. Legacy Tree Genealogists provides genealogy research for clients worldwide, helping them discover their roots and personal history through records, narratives, and DNA analysis. And when your research requires access to on-site archives in the countries your ancestors lived, Legacy Tree Genealogists has researchers in more than 100 countries around the globe who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Legacy Tree Genealogists is the recommended research firm of genealogy industry leaders worldwide, including MyHeritage, 23andMe, and more. Check out what our clients have to say. Absolutely the best. They communicated through the entire process, and my report arrived on time. The story of my family with supporting documents was very fulfilling. Tom G. Google review. Don't wait any longer. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. Legacy Tree Genealogists. We do the research. You enjoy the discoveries.
You know, whether you're new to family history, a seasoned pro, or you've simply missed the event in years past, now's your chance to connect at Roots Tech Connect, the world's largest family history conference. For the first time ever, this event is 100% virtual and 100% free. That's right, virtual and free. Now you can discover your heritage from wherever you are. Imagine 3 full days of discovery, dozens of classes to choose from, taught by presenters from around the world, all from the comfort of your couch. Oh, and don't forget the exciting celebrations of music, food, dance, and traditions from around the globe. Enjoy inspiring keynote addresses and learn from top-notch speakers, and see yourself in the story of the human family. Discover your story. Discover Roots Tech Connect. Live online February 25th through 27th, 2021. Register for free at rootstech.org. That's Roots Tech Connect, free at rootstech.org. Well, genies, what a time we're all going through right now. And with all this time on our hands, you probably agree the best lemonade we can make out of this is to sharpen our genie axes and learn how to extend our family trees, gather more photos and documents, and discover those remarkable family stories our descendants can benefit from for generations. Well, I have more time now, too, and I want to help you learn what you need to know. That's why I've created a new Facebook group, Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. I'm so pleased that so many of you have already signed up and are helping us to create a supportive community of family history researchers. On this page, we can brainstorm and share ideas on how to tear down those brick walls that we all have. So feel free to join us. The Facebook page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Feel at home with others who live in our genie world and want to make the most of this unique time. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Join us. All right, we're back on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show with Dr. Henry Louis Gates from the PBS series Finding Your Roots. And Dr. Gates, what do you got for us this coming week?
Well, the title of this episode is called The Shirts on Their Backs, and it features actors Christopher Maloney and Tony Shalhoub. Let's start with Christopher Maloney. His great-grandfather, Enrico Maloney, was an Italian immigrant who sold olive oil on the streets of Boston. His marriage certificate revealed that he was from a tiny village in Italy called Velva, but a closer look at the certificate revealed a fascinating detail, Scott. His parents are listed as unknown. That means that he was an orphan. This sent our researchers into the archives of hospitals around Velva, where we soon uncovered a heart-wrenching story. Enrico was abandoned in a foundling wheel of a hospital as an infant, swaddled in rags.
Oh, no.
Yep, there was a wheel at the door, and you could just put a newborn baby in the wheel, and it would be turned, and the baby would be on the other side, and the parent would then walk away. The staff named him Enrico and gave him the surname Maloney, which translates to melon in English. So we think this name was likely intended as a mocking description of the way his head looked. We also found a series of invoices in the hospital's archives, filed by a nurse who appears to have raised Enrico. Payments stopped when Enrico was about 12, suggesting that at that age he was left to his own devices. But the story has a happy ending, however, with Enrico's marriage and immigration to the United States, where he raised 3 children who all prospered. Can you imagine?
Wow. Talk about overcoming something, huh?
Oh, yeah. Christopher Maloney comes from strong stock. All right, Tony Shalhoub. Tony's father, Joseph Shalhoub, was born in 1912 in Lebanon, which was then part of the Ottoman Empire. In 1914, his father, Milhem Shalhoub, was conscripted into the Ottoman army to fight in World War I. Milhem would die in the war, leaving his wife, Mariam, alone with 5 children. More misfortune was heaped on the family when a plague of locusts descended on the Middle East, just like out of the Bible. Mariam soon perished, and Tony's father, Joseph, a 6-year-old boy, found himself in the care of his older sister, Sophie, who was a teenager. And Sophie was a force of nature. She struggled mightily to keep her family alive. She sent pleading letters to relatives in America, detailing the horrors she and her siblings faced, even describing how her hair had turned gray as a teenager. And over the course of 2 years, she was able to raise enough money to transport herself and her 3 younger siblings to the United States. They arrived in Wisconsin, where she joined her extended family, and they prospered. Then turning to Tony's maternal side, we focused on his great-great-grandfather, whose name was Abdul Naimi. And in the 1890s, much of Abdul's family immigrated from the Ottoman Empire to the United States, settling around Green Bay, Wisconsin, where they worked as peddlers. But Abdul remained in the Middle East, living in a region of the Ottoman Empire, which was then part of Armenia. At the time, Armenian nationalists were pressing for political reforms, and the Ottoman state decided to make an example of them. And sadly, massacres were conducted. And we found an 1895 newspaper article reporting on the gruesome crucifixion, Scott, of Tony's ancestor.
Really?
His crucifixion. It described Abdul's being nailed hand and foot to a cross and left to suffer many hours before being killed by a lance. Isn't it amazing? You look at somebody on TV and all those stories are there like shadows of history that are hovering in your genome, hovering on your family tree.
And they stand on their shoulders.
And they stand on their shoulders. And our job is to unlock that vault and to release them so they can tell their stories both to the guests, to the world, and to brilliant journalists like Scott Fisher.
Ta-da! We'll talk to you again in April when you're back with new episodes. And always fun to keep up with you, Dr. Gates. Thanks so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
And coming up next, David Allen Lambert with another round of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, in 3 minutes. All right, back at it one more time for Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. David Allen Lambert is back. And Dave, our question comes from Rand in Austin, Texas. And Rand writes, guys, I'm thinking of writing a book on my family history discoveries. I hardly know where to begin. Thoughts, please. Wow. I mean, where do we begin, Dave? There's so much to that question.
Oh, I know. I was 12 when I typed up my first 13-page genealogy and gave it to some genealogical libraries, including my own that has it now in their TypeScript collection. So
wow. You
can really do it at any point now with word processing. And you can go to all sorts of different extents with that. I mean, we have Newbury Street Press at NEHGS has been doing some really award-winning books. I mean, of course, it costs to produce these. But you can also, on your own budget, self-produce them and do them as print on demand. I mean, you do these for your own family.
Yeah, I do these for my own family. I've done 13 or 14. I just am finishing up one right now that I've been sitting on over a period of time. Here's the thing, Dave. My wife, Julie, is getting ready for retirement soon, and she's thinking, okay, I'm going to write this book on my dad's side when I'm done. And my comment to her was, no, it doesn't work that way. What you have to do is basically write a series of articles over time and then start to collect them and then have documents that you can illustrate it with or photographs that you can illustrate it with. And obviously you want to keep track of your sources and put it together that way. Now, you can create books, but when you do that, you also have to keep in mind, who is your audience? Is this intended for a broad research group that's going to read this or for just your own family? Maybe you've got a 2 or 3 page story about an ancestor, and that you can just put on Ancestry.com, link to their page on their family tree that you've put up there, or on Family Search the same way. So these are all things you have to consider, and then you got to think about, well, how do I have it published? Do I just want to print it myself? I use a printer, a publisher, who will actually create incredible bindings with lovely gold foil lettering on them. And I create 10 or 15 copies for the family. And this serves a great purpose because it makes sure that if I were to lose everything, the house went up in flames or whatever, that these copies are spread throughout the country and throughout the world. Actually, I have a daughter who lives in Germany, so that the material that I've researched is never lost. And that's the thing that I really am excited about. The other aspect is I always have this strange thought in the back of my head that if something ever happened to the internet, some kind of wild attack, and we went into some kind of digital war, we don't lose that material because it's been printed.
Yeah, that printer that you buy is a very worthwhile thing.
Yeah.
Because digital doesn't always mean forever.
That's right. Paper lasts longer than digital.
Mm-hmm. I would think so. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't want to find out in 500 years my descendants have nothing, because this whole thumb drive that I created for my genealogy is now corrupt.
Yeah, right?
Genealogies were done simpler back then. I mean, in the 19th century, NEHGS since 1845 has been collecting them, and they've been written for decades before, and they were done by correspondence. That's why a lot of the people get frustrated. They say, oh, there's no footnotes or there's no sources here, because they were done by, dear Mrs. Jones, I understand we're cousins. Can you tell me about our grandparents? They didn't supply documents back in the 19th or early 20th century. And, of course, not all genealogies were done to the standards that we have today. So you can always do what I say is a supplement, update a genealogy from the 1890s that you love, but you know that you have more facts than they did. That's called a genealogy redo.
Great question, Rand. Good luck with your efforts, and we look forward to seeing your book somewhere down the line. Dave, thanks for coming on again. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, my friend. Talk to you soon.
And if you have a question for Ask Us Anything, you can always email us at askusanything@extremegenes.com. Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks so much for joining us. If you missed any of it, of course, catch the podcast on iTunes, iHeartRadio, extremegenes.com, Spotify, all those places. Talk to you next week. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.